My name is Mark Anderson. I'm 34, and last weekend, I watched my father stand up in front of 200 wedding guests, lift his glass, and toast to one of his sons, while making sure everyone knew the other was a complete disappointment. Guess which one I was? My little boy Ethan was sitting right next to me in his tiny navy suit, hands folded neatly in his lap like I'd taught him. He turned and whispered, "Dad, why is everyone laughing?" I didn't have an answer, so I lied. They're just excited. "Buddy, it's your uncle's big day." But inside I was cracking, because that laughter, it was aimed at me. The wedding was a masterpiece. Crystal chandeliers, a 6-tier cake that probably cost more than my yearly rent, and waiters in tuxedos serving shrimp cocktails on silver trays. My younger brother Vincent had really gone all out. Of course he had. Elise, his bride, came from money. Old Connecticut kind of money. Their families mingled like they'd known each other for generations. Smiles tight as pearls, laughter light as champagne. And then there was me tucked away at table 9, behind a decorative pillar near the kitchen doors. You know the table. The one closest to the restrooms. The one for people you have to invite but don't want to be seen with. I wore my best suit, pressed it the night before, used a lint roller on my lapel 3 times. I even shined my shoes with furniture polish because that's all we had at home. Ethan helped. "You look like a superhero," he told me, standing proudly with his clip-on tie like the ones who go to grown-up parties. I smiled, but part of me wanted to cry. It hadn't always been this way. Or maybe it had, and I just hadn't wanted to see it. Vincent was the golden child, star quarterback in high school, full ride to Stanford, interned at Goldman Sachs by sophomore year. I, on the other hand, was the kid who barely graduated, who started stocking shelves at Home Central after high school and never left. I worked 2 jobs, one at the store, and one overnight as a security guard downtown. It's honest work. Exhausting, but honest. My dad, Richard Anderson, never hid his disappointment. Smart boys don't stock drywall. He used to say, they run the companies that sell it. I once tried to explain that raising Ethan alone wasn't exactly a walk in the park, that I'd sacrificed things: college, time, sleep to keep a roof over our heads, that I hadn't seen Ethan's mom in almost 8 years, not since she walked out when he was 5 months old, saying she wasn't built for this kind of life. But he'd just waved his hand like I was swatting flies with words. Excuses. He'd muttered, "Real men rise. Period." My invitation to Vincent's wedding came late 2 weeks before the event. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, with gold foil lettering and a subtle smell of rosewater. Inside was a single line, handwritten by Elise. "We hope you'll come. It's never too late to reconnect." I remember staring at that sentence for a long time. Reconnect. Like there'd ever been a connection worth restoring. But Ethan saw the envelope and got excited. "Uncle Vincent's getting married. That's so cool. Can I wear my bow tie?" How could I say no to that? So I said yes, for him. Always for him. The morning of the wedding. I was already tired. I'd worked the night shift, caught 2 hours of sleep, and still woke up early to make breakfast from scratch. Pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, Ethan's favorite. We didn't have real maple syrup, so I warmed up the cheap kind and told him it was vintage Vermont. He grinned and said, "You're the best, Dad." That kind of thing stays with you. I packed his little dress shoes, his allergy meds, and even a backup clip-on tie just in case. When we got to the venue, no one was at the front desk to check us in. A security guy finally showed us where table 9 was. That's when the first red flag hit. No name cards, no welcome, no, "Hey Mark, so glad you could make it." Just a table by the bathroom. I spent the first hour smiling politely and keeping Ethan occupied with coloring pages I'd printed from the internet. He didn't care about the venue or the seating. He was just happy to be there, happy to be part of something grand. Then came the speeches. Vincent's best man got up his college roommate, of course, and told a long story about how Vince never settled. He always reached higher. He refused to be like certain people. Laughter. My father got up next, held up his glass, smiled like a man who owned the world. I always told my sons, he began, life gives you two choices: you either lead or you follow. One of them listened, the other, well, he chose his own path. He looked at me, directly. Some paths lead nowhere. More laughter, a few gasps. Ethan looked up, confused. Why are they talking about you like that? I couldn't breathe. But I smiled anyway. Because you don't break down at a wedding, especially not in front of your kid. Across the room, I caught Elise watching me. She didn't smile, didn't look away either, just watched. And that's when I noticed something odd. She wasn't sitting with Vincent. In fact, she looked almost out of place, her champagne untouched, her fingers curled into tight fists on her lap. It lasted a second, maybe two, but it was the first crack in the porcelain. After the speeches, I took Ethan outside for some air. The evening chill had set in, but it felt better than the pressure inside that ballroom. He held my hand and asked, "Did Grandpa mean you?" I nodded. He did. Why would he say that? I don't know, I said quietly. Maybe because I didn't become what he wanted. Ethan thought for a second. But you became my dad. That's better, right? I swallowed hard. Yeah, buddy, it is. And then the door swung open behind us, fast, like someone had yanked it hard. I turned around just in time to see Elise step out in her heels, wedding gown dragging slightly across the concrete. Her eyes found mine. "Mark," she said, breathless. "I need to talk to you. Alone." Elise's heels clicked against the concrete. Delicate but purposeful. Like she knew time was running out and every second mattered. I pulled Ethan a little closer to me. His small hand clung to mine as Elise stopped in front of us, her breath visible in the winter air. "Can we talk just us?" she asked, glancing down at Ethan with something soft, something that almost looked like guilt. I looked at my son. He was staring up at Elise like she was a princess from one of his bedtime stories. "Would you mind sitting right there?" Bud, I asked, pointing to the stone bench beside the door. "I'll be just a few feet away." He nodded and plopped down, kicking his feet back and forth, completely unfazed. I turned to Elise. "What's this about?" She hesitated, looked down, took a breath. "I didn't know they were going to do that," she said, her voice low. The speech, the seating, all of it. I crossed my arms, unsure what to believe. "You're the bride. You knew the guest list. You knew the layout. You signed those invites." "I did," she admitted. "But I also assumed your father and Vincent would treat you like family. That was stupid of me." I wasn't in the mood for polite regrets. "Why are you telling me this now?" She stepped closer. "Because I found something. 2 nights ago. Something about you. And about Ethan." My body tensed. "What do you mean? About Ethan?" She pulled a small folded paper from a silk clutch hidden beneath her bouquet. Her hands trembled. "I probably shouldn't be showing you this, but you deserve to know. You're not crazy. Mark, they've been keeping things from you for years." I stared at the paper, but didn't reach for it. "Like what?" She looked me dead in the eye. "The trust, the one your grandfather set up before he passed, it wasn't just for Vincent. It was for both of you. Equal shares." I blinked. That trust was dissolved years ago. My dad told me there was nothing left. Elise shook her head. "Not dissolved. Transferred. Illegally." My skin went cold. "Vincent's using it to bankroll this wedding. The house, the Porsche, and your name was never removed, which means what they did was fraud." I couldn't breathe for a moment, not because of the money, but because of the years. The years I'd worked double shifts, skipped meals so Ethan could eat, sold my wedding ring to pay for an asthma inhaler, all while the people who claimed to be my family lived like royalty off money meant for us both. And they had lied, repeatedly. The weight of it all nearly crushed me. I sat down hard on the bench beside Ethan. He looked up, confused. "Dad, you okay?" I nodded quickly. "Yeah, buddy, just a little dizzy." Elise sat on the edge of the planter across from us, careful not to ruin her gown. "I didn't plan to drop this on you today, but when I heard your dad's speech, when I saw where they stuck you, I couldn't stay quiet anymore." "Why now?" I asked, bitter. "Why not last week, last year?" She hesitated, because I didn't know who to believe. "Vincent always made you sound like you were angry, unreliable, vindictive." I scoffed. I probably would have believed that too, if I hadn't lived my own life. And then I saw the way Ethan looked at you today, how you fixed his tie, how you cut his food before your own, how he held your hand like it was home. Her voice cracked. "No one can fake that kind of love, not even you." For a moment, everything around me disappeared. The cold, the noise, the music still playing inside. It was just me, my son, and the bride of a man who had stolen my future. "What do you want me to do with this?" I asked, nodding toward the folded paper still in her hand. Elise looked me straight in the eye. "Whatever you decide, I'll back you. But I needed you to see the truth for yourself." I finally took the paper and slipped it into my coat pocket. My fingers were numb, but not from the cold. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. "Dad, can we go home?" I looked down at him. His eyes were tired. His bow tie was crooked. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything to anyone. I'd done my job, I'd shown up, I'd endured. But the war had just begun. As we walked back toward the car, I noticed a figure standing off to the side by the valet, an older man in a navy suit and heavy overcoat. "Dave, my manager from Home Central, the closest thing I had to a mentor." "Didn't expect to see you here," I said, genuinely surprised. He shrugged. "Your Aunt Julie insisted, said it'll do the boy some good to have a friendly face." He paused. "She didn't tell me they were going to humiliate you." "Neither did I," I said. "But thanks for showing up." Dave's eyes narrowed. "You look like a man standing at the edge of something." "I am," I said quietly. "Good," he replied, "because some bridges deserve to burn. Just make sure you're the one holding the match." We got in the car. I buckled Ethan in, started the engine. "But I didn't drive away." Instead, I stared at the wedding venue through the windshield, the glowing windows, the shadows dancing behind glass, the sound of distant laughter. And then I reached into my coat, pulled out the paper Elise had given me, and unfolded it under the dome light. There it was, my name, bold, clear, tied directly to a trust I'd been told didn't exist. Signed, notarized, dated only 6 years ago. My jaw tightened. They hadn't just lied, they'd stolen. Ethan was already nodding off in the back seat, head tilted to the side, mouth slightly open. I reached back, pulled his coat over him like a blanket. Then I whispered to myself, "Not anymore." I didn't sleep that night. After I tucked Ethan into bed and kissed his forehead, I just sat on the edge of the couch. That piece of paper from Elise burning a hole through my pocket. I must have read it 20 times. Same words, same signature, same proof that everything I'd believed, everything they'd drilled into me for years, was a lie. It wasn't that I wanted the money, it was what the lie meant. That they had seen me struggle, watch me drown in bills, watch me beg for overtime, watch me show up to family dinners with Ethan in a secondhand hoodie. And they said nothing. They watched. and they let it happen. I called Dave the next morning before the sun came up. He picked up on the second ring. Didn't think I'd hear from you this soon. I need advice, I said. You ever deal with inheritance fraud? There was a pause. You're going to want a lawyer, a good one, and not one of those TV ones who brags about car accidents. I chuckled, but there was no humor in it. Know anyone? I'll text you a name. He's expensive, but he hates rich people, especially the smug ones. Perfect, I said. And Mark. Yeah. Don't wait too long. These people, when they smell fear, they dig trenches. By noon, I was sitting in a modest downtown office that smelled like wood polish and old coffee. Across from me sat a man named Greg Chavez, mid-50s. Thick glasses. Zero patience. He read the paper slowly, quietly. Then he looked up and said, Well, damn, you weren't kidding. I need to know what I'm up against, I said. He leaned back. Best case scenario. You get your share, retroactively. Could be 6 figures, depending on how that trust performed. And worst case. He paused. They bury you in countersuits, paint you as unstable, try to discredit you, dig into your work history, your parenting, maybe even bring up your ex. I swallowed hard. But they don't have a legal leg to stand on if this signature holds. Which it does. He tapped the paper. Only question is, are you ready for war? I thought of Ethan, his tiny hand in mine, the way he whispered, You're the best, Dad. Yes, I said. I'm ready. That night, after Ethan fell asleep, I dug out a box from the back of my closet. Inside was a dusty photo album I hadn't opened in years. I needed to remember. I needed to see it. There was one picture me and Vincent at Grandpa Joe's cabin. We were both around 10, covered in mud, laughing over some fish we'd pretended to catch. Back then, we weren't enemies. We were brothers. But somewhere along the way, Vincent stopped seeing me as one. And my father made sure of it. I flipped to a picture of my dad standing beside Grandpa Joe, arms slung casually over his shoulder. He looked so confident, so certain. The kind of man who never said I don't know. That was the thing about Richard Anderson. He didn't make mistakes. Other people made them at him. I ran my thumb along the edge of the photo. Then I made the call. The next morning, I showed up to my parents' house unannounced. Big white colonial, red brick steps, wreath still hanging on the door from Christmas. I hadn't been there in over 2 years. My mother opened the door. Surprised. Mark. Can I come in? She hesitated, then stepped aside. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and denial. The same plastic runners were still on the carpet. The same porcelain figurines lined the shelves, untouched, unmoved. My father sat in his leather recliner like a king on a throne, TV muted, scotch in hand. 11:30 a.m. Well, he said, not even looking up, the prodigal son returns. I stood my ground. We need to talk. About the trust. That got his attention. His head turned slowly, eyes sharp. What trust? Don't play dumb. I have the documents. He set his glass down with deliberate slowness. If you're here to beg, I'm here to take back what's mine. He laughed, a dry, biting sound. You think a few papers are going to undo decades of choices? No, I said calmly, but they're going to start a conversation you can't control anymore. He rose from his chair, slowly, like a storm gathering force. My mom stood frozen by the fireplace, wringing her hands. You always were the weak one, he said, the needy one, crying about fairness, about effort. I worked 2 jobs to raise my son. And that was your choice, he barked. No one told you to play the martyr. No, I said, but someone did tell me the trust was gone, and that same someone used it to fund a wedding, a luxury car, and a second mortgage on Vincent's house. His nostrils flared. You have no proof. I have a lease, I said, and I have a lawyer. Silence. He looked at my mother. She looked at her feet. And that's when I knew. She knew. Not just about the trust, about all of it. The manipulation, the betrayal. She had stood by and watched me break and said nothing. Mark, she whispered, barely audible. Maybe we can talk about this later. I stepped back. No, we talk now. Or we talk in court. I turned to leave. And my father, in the coldest voice I'd ever heard him use, said, "If you go through with this, you're no longer my son." I didn't even hesitate. Then I guess I'm finally free. Later that night, as I sat at my kitchen table, I wrote out a list: names, connections, timelines, emails I remembered, conversations Elise mentioned, every breadcrumb. Because this wasn't just a revenge plan. This was a reckoning. And no one, not Vincent, not Richard, not even the family lawyer who signed off on the lie, was going to walk away clean. But first, I needed one more thing. A witness, someone who had been there at the beginning, who remembered how the trust was set up, who knew Grandpa Joe's intentions. And I had an idea who. He lived in rural Vermont, drove a rusted pickup, used to fish with my grandfather every summer. Uncle Ray, the courthouse in Essex County wasn't grand. It had no marble columns, no echoing halls or echo chambers, just a red brick building tucked between a shuttered diner and a DMV that hadn't been updated since the Reagan administration. But to me, that place was sacred ground. It was where the Anderson name would finally stop shielding injustice and start answering for it. That morning, I wore the same tie I wore to Vincent's wedding, the one Ethan picked out, blue with tiny white sailboats. He said it made me look like someone people listen to. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror before leaving and repeated those words like a prayer. Outside, the wind cut sharp through my coat. Snow was still packed in the corners of the parking lot, blackened with grit and months of neglect. Greg Chavez met me at the steps, sharp as ever in his gray suit and navy scarf. "You ready?" he asked. I nodded. I've been ready since the day my father toasted to my failure. We stepped inside. The hearing was preliminary, just enough to file the case and freeze further disbursements from the trust account until a full audit could be done. Vincent wasn't there, his lawyer was. A guy named Morgan Withers. Slick, overconfident, wore a Rolex over his shirt cuff like it was 1987. He tried to downplay everything. Miscommunication, he claimed. A clerical error, no ill intent. But Greg leaned forward, voice low and lethal, then explained why the beneficiary's name was redacted after funds were transferred, or how a notarized letter from Joseph Anderson's estate was never presented to the second son who, might I remind the court, was caring for a child alone and working 2 jobs. Judge Harmon narrowed her eyes. Sounds like the kind of error that only benefits the same people every time. Withers stammered. Greg didn't blink. It wasn't over, but we had momentum. As we walked out, Elise was waiting for me by the courthouse steps. "I watched the live stream," she said, pulling her coat tighter. "You were incredible." I didn't say much, I replied. "You didn't have to. The truth did." Then she handed me something in an envelope. "What's this?" "A copy of the wedding videographer's footage," she said. "There's a part where your dad jokes on Mike about how only one son's worth investing in. Thought you might want it." I stared at the envelope. Small, harmless. But suddenly it felt heavier than bricks. "Thank you," I said quietly. And then I asked the question I'd been holding in for weeks. "Why did you really marry Vincent?" Elise hesitated, eyes scanning the parking lot like she wanted an excuse not to answer. Then, because I thought marrying into power meant I'd finally feel secure. Turns out, power without character is just noise. She gave a half smile and walked away. That night, I stayed up late again, Ethan had fallen asleep watching a documentary about penguins. I muted the TV and slid in the video file Elise had given me. There it was. My father, drink in hand, laughing in the groom's suite. Vincent beside him, already tipsy. Cheers, Richard said, raising his glass. To the son who made us proud, and to the other one, who, well, someone's gotta flip the burgers. Laughter, cruel and easy. I paused the video, then rewound it. Watched it again, not because I needed to believe it, but because I needed to remember it. Burn it into my memory so I'd never second-guess myself again. That wasn't teasing. That wasn't a joke. That was a declaration. A man publicly gutting his own son for sport. The next morning, I sent the video to Greg. His response was immediate. They just handed us a torch. Time to light the damn bridge. The court filings went public the following week. Suddenly, I wasn't just Mark, the guy who worked graveyard security and stocked paint cans. I was Mark Anderson, plaintiff in Anderson v. Anderson, and that title made the phone ring. First, it was my cousin April, who whispered into the phone like she was hiding in a closet. I saw the paperwork. I always wondered why Grandpa cut you out, but he didn't. Did he? Then it was Uncle Ray. I've still got the original draft of Joe's will. Typed it myself. Your name was on it. Want me to testify? Yes, Ray. Yes, I did. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. Paul, the wedding videographer, reached out on Facebook. Hey man, heard about the case. I've got B-roll footage from the rehearsal dinner. Caught your dad and Vincent talking about burying the second file. If it helps, it's yours. I met him the next day. He handed me a USB drive. I almost deleted it, he said, but something felt wrong. You kept it all this time? He nodded. Sometimes the truth sticks to the lens. By the time our second hearing came around, we had everything testimony, documents, video, audio. Greg said we were building not just a case, but a story. One that judges remember. Jurors think in arcs, he told me. Villain, victim, turning point, justice. I was all of those things now. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I still had one move left. And I was going to make it where it hurt the most. Vincent had booked a major interview, his first national TV appearance, about launching a new financial product for emerging entrepreneurs. Some startup for rich kids kind of thing. I knew the producer, a college friend of Dave's daughter, and she owed me a favor. So, 15 minutes before Vincent went live, they queued up a video segment titled The Real Face of Legacy. And there it was. My father's voice, that same line, crystal clear. To the son who made us proud and to the other one, who, well, someone's got to flip the burgers. The clip ended. The host blinked. Mr. Anderson, would you like to comment? Vincent's face turned a shade I can only describe as spoiled milk meets rage. He stammered, backpedaled, said it was taken out of context. But the internet didn't care. The clip hit Twitter in 10 minutes. Instagram by 20. Reddit by dinner. Hashtag BurgerSon. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. Because battles are one thing. But consequences. Those were coming. And when they did, I needed to be ready. 2 days after the interview went viral, Richard Anderson's front gate was swarmed with reporters. The kind of old-school local journalists who wore trench coats and smelled like cold coffee and ambition. One even tried to interview the mailman. My father didn't say a word. Instead, he issued a written statement 2 paragraphs long, sanitized and smug about how public perception does not always reflect private truth. He didn't deny the voice in the video. He just pivoted, deflected, tried to outlast the outrage. But the damage was done. Vincent's startup lost its biggest investor within 24 hours. The other 2 pulled out by the end of the week. I heard from Elise that his wedding planner filed a lien against his name for unpaid fees, and the Porsche dealership had started calling about the lease. As for me, I didn't gloat. Because justice, real justice, doesn't need applause. It needs closure. And that was still coming. The final hearing was set for Friday. Greg and I spent the week going over every detail. Uncle Ray was ready to testify. So was Paul, the videographer. Elise had even volunteered to speak on my behalf, not as a bitter ex-in-law, but as a first-hand witness to years of deceit. I didn't ask Ethan to come. He was 9. His job was to be a kid, not sit in courtrooms soaked with generational poison. But the night before the hearing, he asked, "Dad, are you scared?" I thought about lying, then decided not to.
"A little," I said.
He nodded. Solemn. Do brave people feel scared too? I knelt beside him. All the time. Being brave doesn't mean you're never scared. It means you show up anyway. He didn't say anything. But after I tucked him in, I found a small note on my nightstand in his handwriting. It said, "Show up, win, love, Ethan." I folded it into my wallet, right next to the trust document. Friday morning was cold and gray. Rain clung to the air like static. As I walked into the courthouse, I could feel the pressure building behind my eyes, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. The Andersons sat to my right. Vincent looked like he hadn't slept. My father wore his best suit. Of course, like image alone could dismiss accountability. The judge entered. We stood. We sat. And then Greg began. He was surgical. He laid out the trust's timeline, the changes in disbursement, the signatures. He played the video of my father's toast, showed screenshots of bank transfers, played the clip from the rehearsal dinner, Vincent and Richard laughing about cleaning the file trail. Then Elise took the stand.
She didn't cry, didn't waver.
She spoke of conversations, of what she witnessed firsthand, how she tried to speak up and was told, "This isn't your fight. Stay in your lane." Finally, Uncle Ray, calm, steady, said the exact words I needed to hear. Joe Anderson meant for both his grandsons to inherit. It was his way of saying, "I see you, I believe in you, even if your father doesn't." The courtroom fell into silence. Then Judge Harmon spoke. "I've seen plenty of families unravel over money," she said, tone sharp. But this wasn't just greed. This was sustained, coordinated deception. She ruled the trust be reinstated retroactively, that all funds Vincent withdrew be returned, or converted into lienable assets, that both Vincent and Richard face separate proceedings for perjury and breach of fiduciary duty. Then she looked at me. "Mr. Anderson, Mark, I hope this gives you some sense of justice." I nodded. "It does, Your Honor." But it wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my name. Outside, Elise waited by the steps. She handed me a folded letter. "This came to the house last week. I think it's for you." I opened it, recognized the handwriting immediately. Grandpa Joe's. It was dated just weeks before he passed. "Mark, I know life hasn't been fair to you, but fairness and justice aren't the same. Justice takes time, but it always shows up. I left you a share, not just because you deserved it, but because I believed you'd use it well. Make me proud, Joe." I folded the letter slowly, carefully. I had waited so long for someone in this family to say those words. And now, even from the grave, Grandpa Joe showed up. Later that night, back at home, I found Ethan in the living room building a Lego tower taller than his juice cup. I sat beside him, wordless for a moment. "Did you win?" he asked. I smiled. "Yeah, buddy, I did." He looked satisfied. "Then, can we go to the zoo this weekend? I want to see the penguins again." "You got it." He went back to building, and I stared at him, this small boy, who saved me more than he'd ever know. But just as I let myself exhale, my phone buzzed. "Unknown number," I answered, a voice I hadn't heard in almost a decade. "Mark, it's Julia, Ethan's mother." My blood went cold. "What do you want?" A pause. Then, "I heard about the case. The money. I was wondering if we could talk." My fingers tightened around the phone. Because sometimes, when the fire dies down, another spark shows up, uninvited. Her voice hadn't changed. Still soft, still vaguely regretful, like she was always walking 2 steps behind her own apology. But I wasn't the same man who'd once let that softness override every red flag. "Julia," I said, steady. "Why now?" "I saw the article," she replied. "The lawsuit, the payout. I thought, maybe it was time we talked." There it was. Not, "I miss Ethan." Not, "I'm sorry." Just that word again, payout. I stepped into the hallway. Away from Ethan's room. My voice dropped an octave. "We haven't spoken in 8 years. You left. No child support. No birthday cards. Nothing." "I wasn't ready to be a mom," she said, "and I knew you were better at it. But I've changed." "No," I said. "You've noticed change. That's not the same." She paused. "Can we meet in person?" I didn't answer right away, because part of me wanted to say yes, just to see if the guilt in her voice was real. But a louder part remembered Ethan waking up with nightmares and asking why his mom didn't want him. "I'll think about it," I finally said. "But if you try anything, if you so much as hint at custody, you'll wish you stayed gone." She hung up. No goodbye. Just the silence of a door she thought she could reopen, and I just bolted shut. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The court-appointed accountant reviewed the trust. Greg helped file asset recovery motions. I got calls from firms who'd once rejected my resume without a second glance, now offering jobs aligned with my integrity. But I didn't say yes, not yet. Because something bigger was happening inside me. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet, slow breath you didn't know you were holding for years. And when it lands, you feel taller, straighter, like your spine remembers what it means to belong in your own body. That's what healing felt like. I didn't feel the need to prove anything anymore, not to my father, not to Vincent, not to a boardroom full of old men with golf tans and fake concern. I just wanted to build now, for Ethan, for me. One morning, as we walked to school, Ethan asked, "Are we rich now?" I laughed. "No, kiddo, we're safe now." He thought about that, then nodded. "That's better." I opened a trust in Ethan's name, same structure Grandpa Joe had intended. But this time, no tricks, no redactions, just transparency, clean and honest. I called it the Ethan Foundation. And every time I signed a document, I used the same blue ink pen my grandfather left on his workbench. A simple thing, but a symbol now. Something about that pen kept me honest, rooted. It reminded me this wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. A month later, Elise reached out again. We met at the same cafe where she'd once given me the trust letter. Only this time, her face wasn't tight with worry. It was relaxed, open. "I'm moving," she said. "Colorado? Fresh start." "You deserve it." "So do you," she said, then paused. "You were right. About Vincent. About all of it. I wasn't looking to be right." "I know," she said. "That's why you were." We sat for a while. Didn't need to say much. There's a kind of peace that comes from mutual survival. Before she left, she pulled something from her purse, a photo. Ethan, maybe 4 years old, sitting on Grandpa Joe's lap, both of them grinning like fools. "I found it in an old box," she said. "Thought you'd want it." I took it, heart squeezing tight. That photo, It was proof that he had loved us, that somewhere, before the silence and the shadows, we were a family. Real, messy, and still worthy. Weeks passed. Spring rolled in with soft light and baseball practice and the sound of sprinklers on tired lawns. Life, finally, was just life again, until the certified letter arrived. From Julia, inside a formal notice, petition to revisit custody, filed in family court. My breath caught. Not because I was scared, but because I knew this woman wasn't here to mother. She was here to leverage. I sat down, hands trembling, heart hammering. Then I remembered something Ethan once said, half asleep in the back seat after a long day. "You're my home, Dad. Not my house, not my protector. My home." She couldn't take that. Not with a courtroom, not with a lawyer, not with 1,000 technicalities. Because home isn't something you win. It's something you earn day by day, choice by choice, sacrifice by sacrifice. And she'd walked away from that a long time ago. Greg took the case. No hesitation. "This time," he said, "we don't just defend, we expose." And I nodded. Because there was still one last fire to put out. Not for revenge, not for pride, but for Ethan. For his right to be raised in truth. Not manipulation. So I pulled out that photo Elise gave me Ethan and Grandpa Joe. I framed it. Set it on my desk, right next to the blue pen. And when Ethan came home that day, I knelt beside him again. "Listen, buddy, someone might try to change our life soon, but I won't let them. I promise you that." He nodded. Quiet but sure. "I know. You always keep promises." Then he hugged me. Tight. Not because he was scared, but because he wasn't. Story 2. My name is Megan Hill. I'm 28 years old, and this is the story of how my cousin, my own blood, stole my identity one piece at a time. Not my credit card, not my bank info. My identity. And I let her, until I didn't. It started with something so small, so seemingly harmless. I almost laughed. Almost. One Monday morning, I stood in my tiny loft apartment in Portland, Oregon, staring at myself in the mirror. A fresh streak of neon teal ran through my curls, something I'd debated doing for weeks. I was nervous, excited, a little terrified. But mostly, I felt alive. It wasn't just a hair thing. It was a me thing. I'd been feeling invisible for months at the creative agency where I worked. Too many meetings where my ideas got nods. Then someone else got the credit. Too many TikToks where my artwork barely hit double-digit views, while people reposted the same aesthetic in viral trends. Too many days where I wondered if being original still meant anything in a world that seemed to reward copies. That teal streak. It was my rebellion, my reset. My silent scream, I'm still here, I'm still me. And for about 6 hours, it worked. That afternoon, I grabbed an oat milk latte from my usual corner cafe and opened Instagram. First photo on my feed. Bella, my cousin, with a nearly identical teal streak in her freshly dyed hair. Caption, felt like something bold today. Hat new era. Same shade. Same placement, same little curl tucked behind her ear. I swear, my heart skipped. At first, I told myself, coincidence, right? Maybe teal is trending. But then I looked closer. Same cafe, same drink. Same freaking ring I'd bought at a thrift store 2 weeks ago, and she had once said looked a little too artsy. My stomach dropped. I felt my grip on the paper cup tighten. I didn't comment. I didn't even breathe. Instead, I texted my boyfriend. Julian me, she did it again. Julian, no way. Send screenshot. Me, screenshot. Julian, okay. That's creepy. But it wasn't the first time. The copying had started months earlier. At first, it was subtle Bella showing up to family dinner in a jacket similar to mine, asking where I got my combat boots, reposting one of my old art pieces without tagging me, claiming it inspired her new collage. Then came the pottery class. I'd signed up in secret. A weekend escape just for me. A place to lose myself in clay, in the quiet rhythm of creation. A place to breathe. I hadn't even posted about it yet. The only person who knew was Julian. But 2 sessions in, guess who walked in with a matching apron? Bella, hair in a messy bun, sketchbook in hand, smiling like she'd just stumbled into a happy accident. She didn't see me right away. I sat frozen at my wheel, hands deep in clay, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the instructor. She took the spot behind me, asked the same questions I had the week before, used the same phrase "I love how clay listens," something I had said, word for word, to the instructor just last Saturday. I stared at my nearly finished vase, a delicate thing, inspired by my late grandmother's favorite wine decanter. I'd spent hours shaping the neck just right, carving soft lines that reminded me of her hands. Then Bella posted hers. Next day, same shape, same lines, same caption, inspired by vintage family memories. No mention of me, of the decanter she had never seen until she visited my place 3 weeks ago and asked, "Is that antique or just quirky?" That vase broke something in me, not just creatively, personally, spiritually. I wasn't just being copied. I was being hollowed out. Let me explain who Bella is. She's my cousin on my dad's side. Grew up in the suburbs of Bend, Oregon, with everything handed to her on a silver BPA-free vegan-certified plate, while I was working 2 jobs in high school to afford my Wacom tablet. She was getting encouraged into art school after failing out of 3 majors. Her mom, my Aunt Sharon, used to say things like, "Bella just needs a little inspiration. She's a visual learner. Megan, maybe you could show her how you do those things." Those things, my entire identity. Bella was always pretty, Instagram pretty, Pinterest board pretty. She knew how to mimic trends, how to dress like she knew what she was doing. But ideas. She never had her own. Not until me. I told myself she admired me. At first, that felt flattering, even comforting. I was never the one anyone looked up to. Growing up mixed race in a mostly white family meant I was always the artsy one, the moody one, the one with big earrings and bigger opinions. My art wasn't decoration. It was protest. It was therapy. It was survival. So yeah, maybe deep down, I wanted someone in my family to say, "Megan's onto something," even if it came from a place of envy. But this was more than flattery. This was identity theft, with a filter and a hashtag. One night, Julian and I were sitting on the couch, our legs tangled like they always were after long days. He scrolled through his phone, then paused. "Did you see this?" He handed it to me. It was Bella's latest story. She was holding up a canvas. My canvas. Well, not literally mine, but the exact style. The same dripping brushstroke technique I'd been developing in silence for 6 months. The one I hadn't posted anywhere. The one I was saving for my upcoming solo show. She smiled into the camera and said, "Experimenting with this new visual language, I think I'm finally finding my voice." I laughed. Out loud, sharp, bitter. Julian looked at me, alarmed. "You okay?" "No," I said, "I'm not." And for the first time in a long time, I meant it. I wasn't okay because this wasn't just about art anymore, or hair, or aesthetics. It was about existence. It was about the deep, aching terror that everything I was could be repackaged by someone shinier, safer, easier to digest and sold as theirs. And no one would know. No one would care. I stood up. My palms were sweating. Julian watched me. Quiet. Supportive. waiting. I looked him in the eye and said, "I'm done being the blueprint." But I wasn't done completely. Because I had a plan. And it started with a kiln and a crack. Growing up, I always knew I wasn't the easy one in the family. Bella was. Bella with her vanilla voice and camera-ready laugh. Bella who got straight B's and still got praise. Bella who never questioned anything until she started questioning everything I did. But to really understand how it all escalated, the copying, the obsession, the erasure, you need to know who I was before the teal hair, before the pottery, before the silent war. I was Megan Hill, daughter of a seamstress and a mailman, the only black girl in my entire elementary school, raised in a mostly white neighborhood in Eugene, Oregon, and even when no one said it out loud, I knew I was being watched, compared, expected to tone it down or keep it cute. So I learned to build my identity out of things no one else wanted: thrifted skirts, notebooks full of sketches, playlists of jazz and industrial punk, walls covered in my own art because I couldn't afford prints from IKEA. My parents didn't understand it, but they didn't stop me either. Weird is still honest, my dad once said, folding a mailbag with ink stains on his fingers. Don't let them file you down just to fit in. That sentence lived in me like a flame. But flames don't always keep you warm. Sometimes they just burn alone. After college, I moved to Portland because where else would someone like me go? A city with murals on every block and baristas who debated oat versus almond milk like it was policy. I landed a junior role at a small creative studio in the Pearl District. We designed branding packages for vegan snack startups and eco-friendly apps that wanted to change the world through clean UI. It was chaotic, underpaid, and honestly, I loved it because it let me create. But the industry wasn't built for people like me. Most of my coworkers were white, male, and carried design degrees from Parsons or RISD. My ideas were edgy until someone else repeated them with a sleeker voice and fewer earrings. I played the game, softened my tone, changed my email signature to something less aggressive. Let others take credit sometimes because I was still building my brand. And then I'd go home, curl up on the floor with charcoal pencils, and draw things no one could edit. That was where I existed fully, in the raw, in the unfiltered. So when Bella started copying even that, my off-the-grid soul-level expressions, I didn't just feel violated. I felt evicted. I hadn't seen her much after college. She was off doing a fashion certificate in New York, then supposedly working in social strategy for an influencer collective which, let's be honest, meant updating Instagram bios and sourcing meme fonts. We crossed paths at holidays, Thanksgiving, sometimes Easter. She'd always smile too wide and say, "Oh my God, I love what you're doing with your look." Like my identity was a Pinterest board she had bookmarked. Then she'd show up 3 weeks later wearing the same nail color or quoting the same Audre Lorde poem I'd shared during a toast. I brushed it off. I thought, she's lost. She's looking for herself. But when she started showing up in my actual spaces, my pottery class, my coffee shop, my damn art style, I realized something darker. She wasn't looking for herself. She was stealing me in pieces. 1 week after the pottery incident, I visited my mom. She lives in the same small house she raised me in, modest, plant-filled, smells like lemon balm and dreams deferred. "Mom," I said, after we'd shared tea and she commented that I looked like I hadn't slept since 2022, "do you think I'm replaceable?" She looked up from her mug, her brow wrinkled, not from age, but from knowing too much. "Did someone tell you that?" she asked slowly. "Not in words," I said, "but it's like every time I make something, every time I create or express or breathe, Bella's right behind me, posting it, copying it, being praised for it." My mom set her mug down. "You've always had something she didn't," she said, "a center. People like her, they don't build from center. They build from mirrors." I blinked. Then why do the mirrors get the spotlight? She sighed. Because they don't scare people. You do. That night, I lay in my old twin bed, surrounded by posters I'd drawn, at 16 glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, a crooked dream catcher I'd made at summer camp. And for the first time in months, I cried. Not angry tears, not performative. Just tired. Tired of being consumed, curated, trimmed into someone else's idea of cool. I didn't want fame. I didn't want followers. I just wanted to exist without being mined. When I got back to Portland, something shifted. Julian noticed it first. You've stopped flinching at your phone. He said one night, You okay? I think so, I said. I hadn't checked Bella's feed in days. Instead, I'd started sketching again. Only at night, only by candlelight. No cameras, no shares. I was working on a new series called Uncopiable. It would be raw, uneven, full of cracks. And one of the pieces, a shattered ceramic vase, the one I'd made in the class, the one Bella had mimicked and posted. I had kept the original, but one day, I dropped it by accident. It split in 3 clean pieces. I almost threw it out. But instead, I gathered gold leaf, resin, and glue and started learning kintsugi, Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, treating cracks as part of the story, not something to hide. I ran my fingers along the seam. It shimmered. It felt holy. That vase became my symbol. I brought it everywhere in my backpack, wrapped in silk, like a relic, because it was my crack, my gold, my proof. 3 weeks later, I got a DM from Evelyn Jew, a curator I'd met once at a pop-up gallery. She was known for elevating marginalized voices in the creative world and ran an independent gallery downtown called Crucible. Her message was short. Saw your test sketches through Julian. He told me what's been happening. Would love to meet. You free this week? I froze. Julian, he had shown her. He hadn't said a word. I called him, trying not to sound breathless. You went behind my back. No, he said, I went ahead of your fear. We met Evelyn the next day. She was petite, all black everything, hair chopped close to the scalp, eyes that saw through you. She didn't mince words. You're good, she said, flipping through my notebook. But more than that, you're clear, which scares people. I nodded, quiet. I want to feature you. She continued. Solo show, no digital footprint, all analog. But one condition. What I asked. She leaned forward. You can't post anything until opening night. I blinked. Bella won't know what hit her, Julian said softly beside me. And I smiled for the first time in weeks. Because maybe this wasn't about fighting back. Maybe it was about returning to myself, louder, cracked, glowing, and untouchable. Silence had become my armor. While Bella continued to perform growth online, posting filtered shots of her sketchbook, quoting design manifestos she barely understood, I retreated into analog. No more updates, no more hashtags, no more breadcrumb trails for her to follow. And the silence, it drove her crazy. I saw it in her eyes the next time we bumped into each other completely unplanned at a farmer's market on Hawthorne. Oh my God, Megan, she squealed like we hadn't seen each other in months. What a weird coincidence. We both knew it wasn't. She was holding a bundle of dried lavender, wearing wide leg overalls like the ones I'd thrifted last summer. Her tote bag had a screen print of a quote I had painted on a mural in my old neighborhood. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. What have you been up to lately? She asked, tilting her head in faux curiosity. I smiled. Just experimenting, offline. Her smile twitched, faltered, but recovered. That's cute. I always say true art can't be rushed. I nodded. Totally, but it can be stolen. She blinked, caught, but only for a second. Megan, come on, she laughed. You really think I'm copying you? That's so ego-driven. I said nothing. She tucked her hair behind her ear, another habit she picked up from me, and looked around. Anyway, I have a collab coming up with this local collective. They're doing a showcase next month. Maybe you should submit. That was it, my trigger. I knew exactly which collective she meant. It was Crucible, Evelyn's gallery. Bella didn't know I'd already been offered the solo spot. She was trying to sneak in the side door. Again. I smiled, sickly sweet. Maybe I will, I said. Best of luck. As she walked away, I felt a strange heat under my skin, not quite rage, but something more focused, like a magnifying glass in sunlight. She had no idea what was coming. In the weeks that followed, Bella's mimicry grew manic. She posted time-lapses of her experimental work pieces that looked suspiciously like early versions of my uncopyable sketches. She started quoting Black women artists in her captions, something she'd never done before. And she even did a video series called Reclaiming the Self, with long-winded monologues about identity, originality, and the importance of honoring where our ideas come from. No mention of me, of course, but the comments. Full of praise. You're so innovative, Bella. This is giving true artist energy. Finally, someone doing it for the right reasons. I wanted to scream. Julian sat next to me one night as I scrolled through her feed, each post a fresh punch to the chest. You okay? He asked softly. No, I said, my voice low, but I'm getting there. He squeezed my hand. Just promise me you'll focus on the show. Don't let her poison that too. I nodded. But inside, I was brewing something else. 2 days later, Bella showed up unannounced at my apartment. I was in the middle of laying out my piece's delicate paper cuts, mixed media canvases, and of course, the kintsugi vase when she knocked. I opened the door just a crack. Hey, she said breathlessly. I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd drop by. Lies. She lived 30 minutes away. I can't stay long, I said, blocking her view of the inside. She peeked over my shoulder. Is that gold leaf on that piece? My jaw tightened. She couldn't see the whole thing, but she was fishing. Bella, I said sharply, what do you want? She blinked. The fake warmth dropped for a beat. I feel like you're pulling away, like you're mad at me. I stared. You've been copying me for months. You took my ideas, my look, my voice, and turned them into your brand. She shook her head, her voice going high. That's not fair. We're just inspired by the same things. No, Bella, I said coldly. You're inspired by me. But that ends now. She laughed nervously. You can't trademark feelings, Megan. No, I said, stepping back. But I can make sure the world sees who felt them first. And with that, I closed the door. Behind it, I heard her curse, not loudly, but loud enough. She'd dropped the act. Good. Now I knew she was scared. The show was 2 weeks away. Evelyn and I worked late every night, curating the order, testing lighting, framing things just right. She didn't ask why I kept the kintsugi vase in the center of the room, raised on a single plinth like a crown jewel. She knew. It was the heart of the story, the crack, the recovery, the part no one could replicate. One night, as we wrapped up, Evelyn looked at me over her thick-rimmed glasses. You know she's going to show up, right? I'm counting on it, I said. She smiled. Then make sure she sees everything she can't touch. One day before the show, Bella posted a teaser, a blurry photo of a new painting, caption new series dropping soon, just in time for something big. My teeth clenched. I recognized the brush pattern. She'd managed to recreate one of my hidden test pieces likely from memory. I'd shown it to her once, in passing, before going silent. Now she was claiming it. But she had no idea what I'd really been making. Because this time, my work wasn't just about aesthetics.
It was a timeline. Each piece in Uncopiable was dated, documented, raw. I'd kept journals, voice memos, videos time-stamped and notarized. Evelyn helped me archive everything.
There would be no room for denial. This was more than an exhibit.
It was an autopsy.
Opening night came like thunder. The gallery buzzed with anticipation. Creatives, influencers, and curious locals swirled around the space, glasses of boxed wine and citrus spritzes in hand. Julian stood beside me in all black, quiet pride in his eyes. Then Bella walked in. Wearing a handmade poncho I knew she'd copied from a photo of my trip to Santa Fe. She smiled, wide and bright, but her eyes darted. She was looking for the work, looking for a clue, looking for herself. And then she saw the vase. Alone, cracked, gold bleeding from the seam like a healed wound. She stepped closer. Read the plaque. This piece was broken on purpose. It read, reassembled with care, just like the artist. Her face froze. Behind her, the crowd leaned in. People pointed, whispered, took photos. Someone asked loudly, "Wait, didn't Bella post something like this last week?" Another voice replied, "Yeah, but this one feels real." I turned to Julian. He squeezed my hand, and I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I was whole. But the night wasn't over yet, because Bella hadn't seen the final piece. And when she did, she would realize I'd saved the sharpest mirror for last. I watched Bella freeze in front of the final piece. It was positioned in the smallest, quietest room of the gallery, intimate, white walls, a single pendant light dangling above it, almost like a confession booth. The piece was a triptych, 3 raw canvases hung side by side, each one layered with torn pages from my old journals. Charcoal outlines of the same image repeated a woman's back, arched, with a gold seam running down her spine and handwritten phrases circling like whispers. This is where she cracked me. This is how I stitched myself shut. This is where I started lying to protect her. It wasn't just a self-portrait. It was a timeline of erasure. I had stitched in Bella's name. Literally, threaded it in crimson into the bottom corner of the middle canvas. To the cousin who copied my breath, here's a lung, I stitched myself. Julian had begged me not to use her name. Let the art speak for itself. He said, don't get dragged into her drama. But this wasn't drama. This was documentation. I wasn't trying to shame her. I was making sure that, for once, the real story was louder than the reposts. Bella's eyes didn't move. Her jaw clenched. One hand twitched at her side like she didn't know what to do with it. Behind her, whispers swelled. Wait, that is her cousin. Right, I thought Bella came up with that gold spine concept. Damn, Megan wrote this months ago. People were piecing it together. Not in outrage, but in recognition. A slow wave of "oh" that rolled through the gallery like a current shifting direction. Bella turned to me, lips parted. You planned this. I nodded once, calm. You forced me into this narrative, she said, her voice low, bitter. You made me the villain. No, I said, you did that the day you stole my grandmother's decanter sketch and put it on a t-shirt you sold online. Her face flinched. She hadn't expected me to say it. Not publicly, not with receipts. Because yes, there had been screenshots, dates, records. Evelyn had helped catalog everything. Bella looked around. The crowd wasn't just watching, they were remembering, connecting dots between what they saw here and what she had fed them for months. Her power, her carefully curated persona, was unraveling, thread by stolen thread. But that wasn't even the plan. This was just the pivot point. The real strategy had started long before the show. It began with silence, but it wouldn't end there. I had built a series that wasn't just about being copied. It was about reclaiming authorship. Every piece in Uncopiable came with provenance, digital and physical. Julian helped set up time-stamped videos of my process. Evelyn connected me with a nonprofit that supports artists fighting plagiarism. They helped me draft an open letter to publish on opening night.
And then I made the choice that would either redeem me or blow everything up.
I filed a cease and desist. Not for the hair, not for the quotes, but for the specific artworks Bella had reproduced on her merch and sold as part of her Identity Rebirth collection. She'd been making money off me. We sent her a formal letter 3 days before the exhibit. Quietly, privately, gave her a chance to pull the products, take them down, make a statement. She didn't. She posted another reel instead, her painting a gold spine over a blank canvas, while a voiceover said, "Sometimes you have to break yourself to become real." Her caption, "No one owns pain."
So when the gallery opened, I did more than hang art. I handed truth back its name.
After the show, Evelyn released the press packet, photos, journal excerpts, a copy of the letter sent to Bella's team. I posted nothing, but within 48 hours, art blogs picked it up, not in a scandal way, in a story way. Artist's intimate show exposes copycat culture in digital age, the silent theft of Megan Hill, when imitation becomes erasure. It was never about canceling Bella. It was about creating a boundary so loud, no one could mistake who built it. And the reaction? Split. Some called it powerful, necessary. Others, especially in Bella's following, called it petty, overblown, gatekeeping creativity. But the people who mattered, the ones who'd felt invisible, erased, stolen from, they reached out. DMs, emails, even handwritten letters. Artists from across the country, mostly women, mostly black and brown, thanking me for making the theft visible. And one message stood out. "You didn't just get copied, you got harvested, and you made gold out of the wound." Bella, of course, retaliated. She posted a long, tearful video framed in natural light. No makeup, sad piano music in the background. She spoke about feeling attacked, betrayed, framed as a thief when all she wanted was connection. She even quoted one of my old captions again without credit. But this time, the comments weren't so forgiving. People linked to my exhibit, shared side-by-side comparisons. Even some of her own fans asked, "Why are you only speaking now that the receipts are public?" Bella had always thrived on being seen. Now she was exposed. It wasn't revenge. It was restoration. But even restoration has a cost. Because the moment I chose to step into the spotlight, I couldn't step back. People now expected more. Publishers, collectors, interviews. They wanted the story, the trauma, the copycat drama. I had to say no more than once. Because Uncopyable wasn't a brand, it was a boundary. And boundaries aren't made for selling. They're made for protecting the quiet.
A week after the show closed, I walked into my studio.
Alone, no cameras, just me, my cracked vase, and a fresh piece of clay. I pressed my palms into it. It was cold, shaky, raw. But it was mine. For the first time in months, I wasn't creating for a message. I was just returning. And as the wheels spun, the clay rose, wobbly, alive, unfinished, perfect. I used to think revenge looked like fireworks, loud, bright, explosive. Turns out, real revenge is quiet. It slips in like fog. And when the sun rises again, only one side is still standing. The week after Bella's video dropped her tearful apology that somehow never used the words sorry or I was wrong, I stayed silent. Again. No reaction. No Instagram story with fire emojis. No thread breaking it all down. I did something better. I started building something she couldn't predict. A new series. One that didn't mention her, didn't reference our history, didn't even include the word copy. Because what she couldn't understand, and what most people watching couldn't either, was that the final phase of reclaiming yourself isn't confrontation. It's creation without permission.
I called the new series Off Map. No hashtags, no previews, no collaborations.
It was made entirely on paper, rough, torn edges, ink blotted like bruises. Each piece started with a line I didn't think about too much, instinctive strokes. Then I built from there, layer after layer. No two pieces looked the same. Some were soft, almost childlike. Some looked like weapon blueprints. And each of them had a hidden code, a single golden thread stitched through the paper, visible only when the light hit at the right angle.
Not for sale, not for interpretation.
Just there.
Just like me.
Evelyn loved it. She offered to feature Off Map in a group show. People think they've already seen the real you, she said. This will remind them you've still got stories they haven't stolen.
I said yes. But I also had another idea. A riskier one.
I booked a small venue on my own. Not a gallery, not an art space. A warehouse, abandoned, half remodeled, walls full of peeling graffiti. A space that didn't try to validate me through prestige.
It was raw. Perfect.
I called the show Quiet Weapons. The invite was private. No public posts. No press. I sent it to exactly 49 people.
Artists I respected. Mentors who had walked away from the spotlight. A few younger creatives who messaged me saying my last show kept them from quitting.
And of course, I sent one to Bella. Not directly. Through her assistant. Just a whisper, no subject line. She came? Of course she did. She always came. The space had no heat. We lit it with strings of industrial bulbs. The air smelled like dust and steel.
The work. It wasn't pretty, but it was honest.
There was a piece that looked like a shattered window stitched back together with bike chain. Another that used burned Polaroids to form the outline of a spine again. That gold seam running up the middle like a scar that refused to hide. Bella stood at the edge of that one the longest. She didn't cry this time. Didn't fake a smile or ask shallow questions. She just stood there. Then she turned to me. Her voice was small, real. "You win," she said. I looked at her. Not with triumph. With clarity. "There was no game," I said. She blinked. "I thought I had to beat you," she whispered. "Be better. Be more. Something." I shrugged. You can't beat someone when you're using their moves. Silence. Then, a twist I never expected. She reached into her bag, pulled out a small sketchbook. "I started therapy," she said. "I'm trying to figure out why I needed to wear your skin." I stared, guarded, but curious. She opened the notebook. Inside were drawings. Not of me, not of my style, not even good, technically. But they were hers. Messy, unrefined, nervous. Real. "I don't want to be you anymore," she said. But I didn't know who I was until I broke that illusion. I looked at her, really looked. And for the first time, I didn't see my shadow. I saw someone trying to stand in their own light. Was that redemption? Maybe not. But it was enough for me to let go. I nodded once. "Keep drawing," I said, and walked away. That night, Julian and I sat in the center of the warehouse, surrounded by dust and cables and soft jazz from a tiny Bluetooth speaker. "You okay?" he asked, gently. "I think I'm finally something better than okay," I said. "I'm mine again." He smiled, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small, clear box. Inside, the kintsugi vase. Resealed, cleaned, wrapped in velvet. "You left this at the studio," he said. I laughed. I thought it was safer away from me. He leaned closer. "Megan, the point of kintsugi isn't to protect the cracks. It's to honor them. I ran my fingers along the golden seam. Still smooth. Still imperfect. Still perfect. I looked up, and that's when the lights flickered. My phone buzzed. A new email. Subject line: collaboration request. National Art Foundation. I opened it, and my heart stopped. Not because it was a big deal, but because it came with a note. We've been following your work, especially Quiet Weapons. We'd love to feature you in our spring issue. And yes, your silence said more than 1,000 interviews ever could. My hands trembled. Not with fear.
With arrival.
But there was one more thing I had to do. The final piece of the plan. Not revenge. Just return. I walked home that night and dug through a shoebox in my closet. Inside, old photos, sketches from high school, and a letter I had written to myself at 17. The one that said, "You don't have to be loud to be seen. You don't have to be liked to be true. You don't have to win to be worthy." I scanned it. Posted it to my feed. Caption: She stole my voice, so I built a language she couldn't read.
No hashtags.
No tags. Just me.
Finally, me.
I woke up the morning after the post with a strange stillness in my chest. Not the electric hum of anxiety, not that sinking, anticipatory dread that used to greet me whenever Bella dropped something new, or someone tagged me in who wore it better thread. This was silence. Sacred, clean, like the moment after a deep exhale, when the world pauses before drawing in again. My inbox was flooded, some praise, some passive-aggressive notes from people who said things like, "Don't you think you've made your point? You've got talent. Why stay stuck in the past?" But I wasn't stuck, not anymore. I had passed through the storm, barefoot and bloodied, and found myself on the other side, not taller, not shinier, but undeniably mine. I didn't want applause. I didn't want war. I wanted something harder to chase. Peace. Julian took me out that night. No art talk. No mentions of Bella. We went to a small Korean-Mexican fusion place we loved, tucked between a laundromat and a weed dispensary. The kind of place that played lo-fi beats and served tacos on ceramic plates like they were holy offerings. Over dinner, he looked at me like I was unfamiliar. In a good way. "You're softer," he said. I blinked. Softer how? He smiled, like, "You're not waiting to fight." I sat back, sipped my ginger soda, and let his words settle. He was right. For so long, I'd built myself out of resistance, defined myself in relation to what was being taken from me. But now, I didn't need a reaction to feel real. And the twist, the world started listening more once I stopped speaking. A few days later, a message came in from someone I hadn't expected. Not a fan. Not Evelyn. Not Bella. It was Maya, a former art school classmate, the one who once said my work was too black and too broken to be gallery safe. She'd gone on to become a moderately successful curator in San Francisco. Wrote pieces with titles like The Aesthetic of Restraint and Form Over Feeling in Contemporary Practice. Her message was simple. Saw off map. It cracked something in me. Would love to talk on or off record. I stared at it for a long time. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, unsure if the old version of me, the one who clung to every insult, every microaggression, would write back a long, cold red. Instead, I typed, "Thanks, Maya. We all start somewhere." And hit send. Because here's the thing about revenge that no one tells you at some point. You stop needing your enemies to bleed. You just want them to wake up. Bella didn't post again for almost 2 months. No stories, no reels, no aesthetic coffee shots or golden hour selfies. I figured maybe she was retreating, maybe even healing. But then, she returned. With a blog post. Not a video, not a dramatic reveal. A simple blog post titled, "The Mirror I Was Afraid to Look Into."
In it, she didn't name me directly, but she didn't have to.
She spoke about appropriation, about mimicry, about the desperation to be loved, to be special, to belong somewhere even if it meant borrowing someone else's skin. She wrote, "I confused admiration with entitlement. I saw someone shining and believed I could bottle that light without asking where it came from. It wasn't perfect. It didn't undo what had happened. But it was the closest thing to truth I'd ever seen her offer. And that was enough for me to stop dragging her shadow through every creation I made." I bookmarked the post, closed the tab, and went outside. The air that evening smelled like wet pine and asphalt, and I realized I could finally smell the world again. In the months that followed, Quiet Weapons was picked up for a digital feature by a major arts nonprofit. No glamour, no interviews. Just a raw, quiet walkthrough with subtitles and soft piano in the background. The comments, full of people saying, "This made me feel seen. Finally. Something that doesn't talk at me but with me. This healed something I didn't have words for." No one asked about Bella. Not one. They didn't care about the feud. They cared about the feeling.
And maybe that was the real win.
But perhaps the most unexpected twist came during a panel I was asked to join about identity and authorship in the digital age. I almost said no, but something told me to show up. I sat on a stage beside two other artists, one Indigenous, one disabled and queer. We talked not about being copied, but about being flattened, about how visibility without autonomy isn't empowerment. I said, "People think being seen is the goal, but being seen without context is just another form of being used." After the panel, a young girl came up to me. She was maybe 17, nervous, holding a sketchbook with trembling hands. She opened it and showed me drawings raw, emotional, weird, beautiful. "I didn't think people like me could make art," she said. "Then I saw yours." And that was the healing I'd been chasing all along. Not revenge, not fame, but connection without extraction. Art that didn't require theft or translation. Just truth. That night, I went home and sat with the vase. The same vase I'd cracked, gilded, and carried with me through every phase of this war. It still held its seam, still shimmered under the lamplight. But now, it was dusted with fingerprints from people who'd touched it at the warehouse show. Imperfect, human. I decided I wouldn't clean it. Let it bear witness. Like me. A vessel not broken, but built again with choice. I turned off my phone, lit a single candle, and began sketching something new. Just lines, curves, movement. No plan, no theme. Just a quiet golden thread, threading back toward myself. It's strange how quiet a room can be once you no longer owe it your pain. No noise, no buzzing tension, no flicker of your own image reflected through someone else's gaze. Just you, breathing, fully, finally. 6 months after Quiet Weapons, I sat in a circle of folding chairs at a community art space in Oakland, nothing fancy, just concrete floors, open windows, and people willing to show up without ego. We were all there for the same reason, to talk about ownership, of work, of truth, of identity. An older woman with silver braids and a sweatshirt that said "Create Loudly" leaned in toward me. "You're Megan, right? The one from the Gold Spine show." I smiled, nodding slowly. She reached into her bag and handed me a folded piece of paper. Inside was a charcoal sketch, a torso stitched down the middle, broken open like a book. But in the center, instead of scars, it was blooming small hands reaching out from the crack, holding light. "This is what your story did to me," she said. "It made me stop hiding my fracture." I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just held the paper close and let the moment press into me like ink into cotton. I've learned something about legacy.
It's not what survives you.
It's what can't be erased, even when someone tries. Bella tried, and to her credit, she stopped. After her blog post, she faded into something rare for someone who had thrived on being seen. Quiet. She didn't try to reboot her brand. She didn't do an apology tour or post a Notes app screenshot.
She simply disappeared.
At first, I expected that to feel victorious. But it didn't.
It just felt done.
A chapter closing. No dramatic snap. No standing ovation. Just a door shutting with a soft click behind you. And you walking forward lighter, wiser. Still carrying the scars, but not letting them steer. Julian and I eventually moved in together. Not in some fairy tale sense. There were still fights over laundry and toothpaste caps, and whether our dog deserved another overpriced puzzle toy. But there was laughter too, and warmth, and an understanding that neither of us needed to play hero or victim anymore. We were just whole, side by side. And sometimes, when I'd catch him watching me sketch in the early morning light, his coffee steaming, eyes soft, I'd think,
this is what truth buys you.
not perfection, but peace that's earned. The final twist came on a Tuesday. Gray sky, no meetings. I was reorganizing old boxes in the garage when I found it. A plastic sleeve of Polaroids from my first solo show years ago, when I was still scared to claim space. One photo stopped me. It was of Bella. She was standing beside one of my earliest pieces, a cracked ceramic bowl with the words, "Hold what breaks you," etched inside. In the photo, Bella wasn't performing. She wasn't mocking or mimicking. She looked proud and small. Not diminished, just humbled by something she didn't fully understand yet. I sat down right there on the concrete floor and stared at it.
Maybe, I thought, that version of her had never intended to steal anything.
Maybe she just didn't know how to create her own story yet. Maybe that's what this was always about. People who mistake proximity for permission. A week later, I mailed her a letter.
No return address.
Just a note. I hope you're making your own things now. We both deserve to become something more honest. No signature. No invitation. Just closure. And now, here I am telling you this story, not because I need you to side with me, not because I want clicks or justice or praise, but because if you've ever been copied, erased, doubted, overwritten, if you've ever had to fight just to keep your own voice from fading beneath someone else's volume, I want you to know you're not crazy. You're not petty. You're not broken. You're real. And that's more dangerous and more powerful than anything they could ever steal. So here's what I'll leave you with. The Kintsugi vase sits now in a museum, part of a rotating exhibition called Restorative Archives. It's not the flashiest piece, but people stop at it every time. They lean in, read the gold, feel the seam. One girl once whispered, "It's like it's still breathing." And maybe,
So am I.
somewhere out there, Bella might be creating again. Maybe she's painting. Maybe she's writing. Maybe she's learning how to exist without borrowing someone else's shape. I wish her well. Truly. Because when you heal for real, you stop needing enemies. You start becoming the author of your own story. And authors, we write endings, even when they don't look like revenge, even when they feel more like rebirth. So if this story cracked something open in you, if you saw even a sliver of your experience mirrored here, don't just sit with it. Create from it. Start with the scar. Thread it with gold. And let the world feel the weight of your unstealable self. You don't need to be louder. You don't need to be better. You just need to be yours. Because in a world obsessed with replicas, you are the original. If this story spoke to something deep in you, maybe something you haven't had words for until now, don't let it vanish into the scroll. Like, comment, share it with someone who's lost their voice. And if you've ever rebuilt yourself from the ashes of someone else's illusion, tell us in the comments below. What's the scar you turned into art?